Welcome to my channel. Today's video is going to be on the use of tweezers. This is as a special request, produced as a special request for a subscriber. I understand that the use of tweezers can be a little annoying at times. When I first started watchmaking, I did had too much pressure on my tweezers and flung a lot of parts on the floor, which is not a fun activity. End up having to use fine glasses and a magnet to try to find some stuff, and not good. So this particular discussion is going to be the use of tweezers and how to grip the parts with the right amount of pressure so they don't fly on you, and you can actually rotate the tweezers while you have a part within the tweezers. So I made a funny video before, but I took that off because I think this warrants some discussion. Just as this is not brain surgery, but I'm sure that surgeons have to learn how to use their tools and have dexterity so they don't slip. In watchmaking, if you're working on a $10,000 watch movement, and you make a mistake by dropping a screw onto the hairspring, something like that, it could be a bit of a disaster to recover from. Or if you're working on a hairspring and you're trying to reshape the hairspring, or whatever you're trying to do with that hairspring, and you make a bad move with the tweezers, it can cause issues. If you're using two tweezers at once and you're reshaping a hairspring, then you're going to need to know how to do that very carefully with the tweezers. So I'm just going to go through some basics on this. I'm sure there's people out there that understand a little bit more than me on the use of tweezers, and this is what I've learned so far. So let's get at it. So here you have a few different types of tweezers that are used. I guess there's no definition between a tweezer and some other tool being used that's like a tweezer. So I've got basically a brass tweezers here. They're non-magnetic. There's different strengths. This is a 3, and it just depends on how comfortable you are with the tweezers. This takes almost no effort to close the end of the tweezers. You have to make sure that the tips of the tweezers are kept in good condition. They're not bent. Oftentimes you're using the tweezers. Perhaps you're doing colleting and you're putting a very fine piece of a brass needle into a collet, and you're using the tweezer to squeeze that needle in. And if that tweezer is not in good condition on the end, then it can cause damage to that needle as you're trying to do that. You can clean your tweezers. I mean, just grab something here. You can use what's this stuff called? It's not pegwood. Anyway, you can use this to clean the ends of your tweezers before you use them, right? So this when I remember the name of this, I'll let you know. Anyway, so you just jab them into the tweezers to make sure there's no dirt on the end, because sometimes you can get Rodico stuck on the end of your tweezers because you're using them to place some Rodico somewhere to help you with putting in a clutch on a watch or something like that, right? So and I showed that in a previous video. So this cleaning the end of the tweezers is absolutely necessary, and you have to make sure they're not too far apart on the tips or too close together on the tips, so they can give you a good control over that part, right? So these other tweezers or pinchers or whatever you want to call them that I have, these here are used just for cutting. So if I'm cutting a part off the end, like I said before, if I'm colleting a hairspring and I want to cut the needle-like pin that I put in the collet to hold the hairspring in place, I'll use this nipper to nip the end of that off and get that done, right? So this one here also looks to be a nipper, but it's got an angle at the end, as you can see, and I believe these ones are for removing hands. So you can go underneath the hands like this, close it like this, and then lift up. So it's very delicate work. These ones are in very good condition. American Lambert, it says America Lampert, Switzerland. So they're 15 A's. So that's this. These ones cost me obviously $15, and they're G-Boli. So they're G-Boli nippers, which is very high end. And I got that in just in a hardware store that was selling watch parts. There's a pretty neat hardware store up where I live in Canada that has some tools that are for watchmaking occasionally. And these tweezers I've used for just getting in there and doing some very detailed work and picking parts out at an angle. And they're from France. It says Francois Messier from France, and they have their applicable use. I don't use these very often. They can become magnetic, and we'll talk about that in a second. These tweezers have a sort of a U shape on the tip, and they're conforming, so it's a U and another U inside. And they're used actually for shaping a hairspring. I've used this for when I have a hairspring, or when I have a mainspring actually for a watch around a collet. I can actually take the mainspring and just go like this, like close in on it, and it'll bend that mainspring, but it won't work for pocket watches because it's too small. But you can use this for hairsprings, just to make a bend in the hairspring ever so lightly, right? So, but you know, making bends in hairsprings, you're better off using two tweezers, holding the hairspring with one tweezer while you're nudging it with the other one to shape the coil or make the bend on the tweezers. So magnetism, I use these tweezers, right? And I believe these are Anchor tweezers. Everyone makes pretty good brass tweezers, so I use these tweezers. They're non-magnetic, which I really like. I don't have to worry about magnetism. They can get dirty on the tips, so you just have to clean those tips off every now and then, make sure they're nice and clean. And then they'll stay in good condition. It's like dressing your screwdrivers as well. So you can dress your tweezers. Just make sure they're touching at the very tip, so you can grab the parts and stuff. So I think that's about it for the tweezers. You can buy them in a pack of 5. So here I've got a set of tweezers here I bought in a pack. And again, like I said, these are Anchor tweezers. Just turn that around for you. So tweezer set of 5, Anchor. They're not very expensive. I think this was from Esslinger.com in the US, and it might have cost me $50, maybe less, but they're good. They're good tweezers. So get yourself a good set of tweezers. You don't need to buy G. Bowley tweezers for way overpriced. Excuse me, I had a cough again. So you need to figure out how to hold a tweezer. So if I let's get into that. You know, long fingernails are for guitars, I've told you a million times, but I hold my tweezers like this when I'm using them. So I've got the tweezer basically coming over the end of my hand here for some stability, and I've got my my hand at an angle, and I'm holding it like I would hold a pencil. So if I'm writing, right, it's exactly the same way you were taught to write with your hand, with a pencil like this. So, and very loosely held. So when I can use the thumb here then to just push the tweezer in, thumb and finger basically, to push the tweezers in to grab something ever so lightly. So you're just using the muscles here in your hand like that to grab that part. So if I just dump a few of the parts in here, because I don't want to dump them all, I'll have to pick them all up. And I'm looking at some parts here that are not so small. They're pretty big and pretty large in size, and I would grab parts differently for different purposes. So if I'm lining these parts up here, if I'm putting a part into a movement, for example, like let's say I'm taking a dial washer and I'm picking a dial washer up, I wouldn't pick it up by the head like this, right? Because it has to go directly down into the dial. So there are times when you would pick a part up by the head like that. Well, mainly if I want to put it in and I'm just laying it down to push in, I'll pick it up by the threads. So let me grab another part here that's a bit easier to deal with here. Let's say this one here. So I'm picking this part up by the threads right now, and I can just lay that down on the movement, and then as I get it on the movement and the hole might be beside it, I would make sure that the tip of that screw is in the hole, and I just tap it in with my screwdriver. So I'd lay it down first and then tap it in, and that's when it's really difficult to get a screw into place, right? Normally when I'm trying to get a screw in place and I'm not doing that, I can lift the screw up like this, And then I need a larger screw to explain this properly, so let me just pick something up like so. Here, get a big screw like this, and if this is laying down, and I would pick that up from the threads like that, and it's at an angle right now. So if this is at an angle and my hand is at an angle, it's not going to go into the hole like that. So I would normally just straighten my tweezer up like this, and then tap down on the mat, and then look at it again. So now look at the angle I've created by tapping down on the mat. So I've grabbed the part like this, like that, tap down on the mat once, and all of a sudden I've got the right angle to put that in. So that's one way of doing it. The other way is you can grab it the other way and turn your hand around. So here's a technique to turn your hand around. Before I grab a part, let me get rid of this big huge part. I need a decent sized screw that isn't how about like that. This is a long one here, so this would be some kind of a dial, not a dial screw, but a casing screw maybe, to put the washer, or put the once you put the movement in. So this would be a case screw. So this thing is, my pad here is moving, it's migrating. So the case screw, so if I pick the screw up like this, right, and I want to put it in, I can't put it in like this. I actually have to turn the screw around, right? So it only works if you're able to move the part around without dropping it. So here's the technique I use to do this. I grab a part like this, and if I drop it, I apologize, but I grab a part like this, and then I'll shift my hand, my finger down here forward until the knuckle part of my finger actually touches here, which gives me an angle to rotate like this, right? So it's a little bit of technique here, but you're doing this, and you can hold on to that part like so, and then you can actually move your hand like this, and then grab the edge of the screwdriver like that, and then turn it like that, and then re-grip like this. So you're basically doing that. You're doing that. So I didn't do it with the part because I dropped it. I was looking at my hand while I was doing this, so I wouldn't screw it up. So you're doing this like that. So if I have the screw in my hand like that, and I just want to put it in the movement, I do that. So I just turn that around. So I've got the screw in my hand like this, and I go like this, and then there it is. And I got to stop looking at my hand because I keep dropping the screw. Watch your parts as you're doing it. So there's always that fear of dropping the part where you don't want to drop it. So that's if you grab the screw like that, then you can grab it like this, turn it around. I dropped it again. This doesn't show that I can do this really well, does it? So turn it around like that, and then put it in. So let me grab a smaller screw, this little tiny one here. So I grab that screw here and hold it lightly, and then turn my hand around like that, and then bam, in there. So I grabbed it the wrong way, but often I will be grabbing a screw for a cap jewel, and those screws are super small, and I have to actually take that cap jewel screw and place it in the hole, and I end up having to pick it up one way and then turn it around the other way. So, and you just have to do that because you're still applying pressure on the blade like this when you have your hand like this. So you get the pressure like this. I'm going to try to do this without dropping it. Pressure like that, and then like this, jog it out like this, and then turn it around. I gotta stop looking at my hand. I can't explain it while I'm looking at my hand. I gotta look at the part almost, and then turn it around like that, and you're good, right? So that's how you do that, and you just practice it a lot. That's all. Practice it a lot, and when you're working on watches, try not to hover over parts that you know, if you're putting a part into a pocket watch, say, try not to hover over areas in the watch where you're going to cause some damage. So let me just open a pocket watch up here and show you. So here I've got a vintage. What is this thing here? This is it's adjusted. It is a Waltham. So this is an old Waltham pocket watch, and I'll put a wind on it here, like that. So if I were working on this watch and I were moving the screw or whatever, I try not to hover over the watch or over where the movement or where the balance is on this watch, because if you drop it, you've got all kinds of other problems, right? This is a big watch. It's not a very good example of that problem existing. So let me get something else. So I've got an old Russian watch movement here, and I've loosened the screw for the balance cock on this. And so to remove the screw off of this, I'd be picking this up by its head, and I'm trying to get close enough to this so I can see it, and I've got my loop on. So I grab the screw by the head and then pick it up like that. So that's under very light control. Like I said, if you hold that screw tightly, because of the angles of the screw, that's going to fly off somewhere unless you have exactly both sides of that screw, right? So equal pressure on both sides, which is almost impossible. So now I wouldn't lift this screw over the balance or anywhere where that could drop in, because that could cause me other problems trying to find that screw. So I just lift it away from the movement. If I need to turn that screw around, I would turn it around like that. So in a technique I showed you before, I'm able to turn the screw around like this while still holding the head. When I put that screw back, however, let me just drop this off to the side and see where it's somewhat visible. I would probably end up grabbing the screw by the threads like this. So I actually have the screw by the threads, and then I would put it so the tip of the end of the screw would be near that hole like that, and then just sort of edge it in like this. So I don't need to actually drive that screw right into the hole directly. If I can, great, but I wouldn't normally just grab the head to try to do that. If I grab the head of the screw from down here, I'm at an angle. So I pick it up like that. The screw is at an angle, so how am I going to straighten that up? The screw is so small, if I end up pounding down on the mat like this, it's going to be a little more difficult for me to do that. I could angle my screwdriver when I pick it up and then put the screw in like that, but you don't really need to do that. If you can get the head close, it just slides right in, no problem, and you can pick it up by the head like that. So that's the technique used, and you can still, in this case I wouldn't need to turn the screw around, only because I can just lay it down like that and then tap it into the hole, right? So, and there we go. So that's a great example of how that works. And so I wouldn't need to turn that around, like I said before. If I'm putting in a case screw or some other type of screw, and I do need the angle on that because I want to drive that screw down somewhat, just like this one here, this screw here, which is I think they're called case screws, but anyway, this screw here, I would want to be able to line it up to put it into that hole, because it'd be too long to tap down, right? So I'd have a problem there. So in the example of maybe a screw on a bridge, let me go in here and see if I can remove the screw here. I'm not sure how tight this is. I'm sure. Let's hang on a second. Let me just try some stuff here. Alright, I'm a little bit more in focus right now. So as I was saying before, you just take that screw, and then you can just make sure the tip of the end of that screw is there, and then you can just tap it into the hole like that. So, and pick the screw up by the head. And often I will, if I'm really nervous about getting that screw out and dropping it, I'll get a piece of Rodico out. This is Rodico. I'll form it into a tip like this, like that, and then I'll just tap that screw to get it out. So if I'm doing a screw that's, say, for a there, I just placed it straight in. If I'm doing a screw for taking a screw out for a cap, like a cap jewel is in a and it's got a screw to hold that cap jewel in place, I would just tap the end of it like that and be able to pull that out. Now, of course, it's not going to work for me because it's probably not the kind of screw that I would use, or I wouldn't and I tapped it and it actually caught the threads, and now it's in there. So forget that. But anyway, I used my piece of Rodico for grabbing that screw. I'm not sure if that'll work. There we go. So there's a Rodico. It just grabbed the screw. It's still stuck to the Rodico, and there's really no issue with that screw dropping if you just tap it and then pull the screw up. So I use Rodico for removing the cap jewel screws for when they're being held in by a very tiny screw, or if I'm working on the balance cock here, and there's screws that sometimes hold the cap jewel in place on the balance cock. Sometimes in the European watches they're on the bottom side. On a North American watches they'd be on the top side. I'd probably use Rodico to grab those, because I don't want those to fly into where the jewel or where the balance is and foul the hairspring. So like I said before, you put the screw down like that and try to get the tip of the screw into the hole and just tap it in like sideways, and it should fall in place like that. And then you can bring your screwdriver over and then tighten that up. And another tip I have for you is that when you're tightening up the balance, I gotta grab a toothpick here, but when you're tightening up the balance cock, sometimes the pressure on that balance cock can make it ride up or down as you're tightening it. And once you have it in place and the balance is freely moving, right, so you've got some nice movement on that balance, I use a toothpick to just hold the balance in place very lightly so that the action of the screw doesn't move the balance cock around. So that's just a tip that helps you put these things in. And then once I've got it in, I don't tighten it right away. I make sure that the balance is still freely moving, and once I know it's freely moving, then I can put some pressure on that screwdriver and tighten that down. So that's that. So for these, I'm not sure if I can use this screwdriver to remove this, but for these screws here, this thing has been in for 1,000 years. So these old Russian watch movements are great though for just learning how to use screwdrivers and stuff. I bought these years and years ago when I first started working on watches, just to strip them down and put them back together again. I ended up 50 watch movements for $50. So there's a screw, and it just found itself back into the hole. But there's a screw I just took off. So I would, in this case here, let's say this is a little bit bigger screw, and I want to make sure that's in the hole. I don't want to put it alongside, because if you have a long screw, this one will work. But if you have a long screw and you try to do the technique where you put it near the hole and then tap it in, usually it doesn't work. So a long screw, you actually have to align that up properly. So in this case, if I grab the head of the screw and then turn that around using my technique, then I can basically find the hole for that and then drop it in and do that and then tighten it up. As I said before, if I grab the screw from the other side, let's just turn this around here, try not to drop it, so lay that down like that, and I had grabbed the screw from this side like that on the mat, and then I use my technique to turn that around, and I'm going to try not to drop it while I'm doing this. Right, there we go. Walk that around while you're keeping pressure on it. Then I now have that screw in the right position to drop into the hole. So it's a matter of doing this and keeping pressure. So 1, 2, 3 with the thumb, and then 4 back into position. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I remember in the military they taught you how to march that way, right? You counted by numbers, squad 1, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4. And again, I apologize for my fingernails, because I do play guitar, play classical guitar and all kinds of styles, and you have to have long fingernails for plucking. So just for proof, they're not long in my other hand. There you go. So, and my pinky fingernail's not long, because I don't pluck with my pinky. So that's basically how you use how you hold screws. As I turn the screw around, and you can turn it pretty fast and I'm maintaining pressure on that screw while I'm turning that, and it's just practice. So I push that in, and there you go. And let's just screw that one down. Try to screw it down. Let me get close here. I think my movement is not tight in this movement holder right now. Plus my screwdriver actually slipped. There we go. Screw that down. Try to stay completely vertical with your screwdriver when you're screwing parts down. If you're not vertical, I'm trying to stay out of the way of the camera because I'm very close to it, but if you're not vertical and you're at an angle at all, the screwdriver will slip off of that. And plus, if you haven't dressed your screwdrivers properly, then they're not square on the tip. They don't have the right angle while fitting into the slot of the screw. Then they're not going to work properly. So you got to have the right angle on the screwdriver, so they're dressed properly this way, and then they're flat. So you have to dress the end so that there's a little kind of a micro square on the end of the screwdriver. So anyway, so that should be good enough on how to use tweezers. And like I said earlier, you can clean the tweezers just by jabbing them into a piece of whatever it's called. See, I can remember what pegwood is called because you end up, and this is not pegwood, but you end up pegging out the holes, so I remember what pegwood's called. This is, and I just for some reason can't remember the name. Anyway, so but you guys know what it's out if you're into watchmaking. You know what this is. So that's that. So there's my quick discussion on screwdrivers and how to hold parts. Let me just get some other stuff out here just quickly. So these are dial washers here. Or no, these are not dial washers. These are screws for balances. So these are balance screws. I'll pick one in the middle because it's like that. So in this case here, very small screws like this, and you're trying to hold these screws and put them into the balance the same time you're holding them. So in this case, it's the right tool for the right job. So there's a very small screw I'd grab that you'd want to put into the balance, but you don't want to basically hold that screw like that. So in this case, this is not a screwdriver, but this is a tool that's meant for grabbing these kinds of screws. So I would be opening that up. There's a small groove on the end of this tool right here. So this would turn around like this. I could hold that by the threads very lightly with one hand, right? And I'm right-handed when I hold screwdrivers, but I'm actually left-handed when I throw. So, and all I do here is I put that in the slot, and there's a groove in the end there, and I push this up with my thumb like that to put some pressure on it, and now I have that screw in place, and I'm able to take a balance and then hold that balance in one of my jigs and turn that screw into the balance by just holding it like that, resting in my palms, and then turning it like that. So in this case, you're holding this with the tweezers, since this is all about tweezers. You're holding this part. It jumped right back into the wrong thing. You gotta make sure that washer or that screw's in the right hole here. So you're holding it by the threads. You're having to use the hand you're not used to. So I would, because I'm used to using this hand and I'm very careful with grabbing this, and I'm sliding this down to close in on it. I can hold this very lightly, put it into the tool, and then close the tool down here and make sure it's as close to aligned with the shaft here as possible, because you don't want the screw to actually be twisting as it's going into the balance. So anyway, that's sometimes you do have to use the other hand with tweezers. And I hope it wasn't saying screwdriver the whole time, because I tend to do that. So if you're using, always have two tweezers ready to work on stuff, and that's, like I said before, if you're working on hairsprings and you actually have to hold the hairspring with one hand, and let's just say this is a big giant hairspring, you're holding the hairspring with these tweezers and you're just nudging it this way to put a bend on it, or you're moving it like that to put a bend on it. You're using two tweezers to do that. Both of them you're holding very lightly, and I would use my stereo microscope to work on that. As well, your dexterity improves when you're looking through a stereo microscope, for somehow your brain understands that you're close up, and it coordinates your hand with the very small object. You can be very, very precise with one of these tweezers as well. So if you have any shakes or whatever and you have to steady your hand, then you can use one hand over the top of the other hand. So you can just basically I can't show you right now, but put one hand over the top of the other hand to steady it. So maybe I'll just switch to the other camera view for a second to show you. So here's a bit of the mess I have going on here. I'm not sure why my camera is moving a bit, but it's attached to something that shouldn't move. Maybe we got an earthquake happening. But if I really need to steady my hand, let me move this out of the way, and I'm picking up, say, these ancient, these are timing washers, actually, in a case. So, and we've got all the values here on the side, and I've got timing washers that are so small. See, if they're so small you can't see them. There's one right there. There's a timing washer right there. So if I were to turn this upside down, tap that timing washer out onto the mat, and pick that up, and I wanted to be extra steady with that, and I'm worried, and say my hands are very good, they're not shaky at all, so I can pick up very small objects with my hand, with my screwdriver, without a problem, and lay them down. But if I have a very, very small screw like that, and I want to pick that up, but I've got a little bit of a shaky hand, I can use this hand over the top, just lay it down like that to stabilize the hand, and then pick it up with your screwdriver, and then you can move it around like this. If you're working on watches, you've got pretty good movement there. So and I don't have got my loop on, but I'm not using my loop right now. So when you use your loop, you're a lot more precise with smaller objects. So you can just lay your hand across this hand to work on that, so you don't tweezer anything up. So if you're trying to pick up that screw and you need stability, or you're trying to pick up a very small dial washer, as I've showed you before, then you're going to need to have some stability. So it's better if you don't have vibration in your hand, but I guess as you get older that might happen. And then again, here's the technique I used earlier to turn that screw around. So, and I'm not dropping it at all, which is good. So then I can just keep turning that in circles, and as you can see, that screw is still there. I'll just prove it where I dropped it. Pick that up again, and then turn that around, turn that around. Turn it 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the technique. Anyway, so that's my video. Let me get back to my other view, and we'll have a quick chat before I end. So as I said before, when you're using your tweezers, make sure the ends are clean. And I kind of remembered what it's called. This is pith wood. So just take a piece of pith wood, don't let it pith you off, and jab it into the pith wood so the ends are absolutely clean when you're clean and dry when you're using them to pick up parts, and just practice over and over again. So what I did was I used movements to help me just keep working, screwing screws in and then removing them with tweezers, and it gave me a little bit of pressure because I didn't want to drop them in where the hairspring was, and so it allowed me to work on the movements and not be afraid, basically, because if you have any fear, you're going to be nervous and drop it, right? So the other thing you could do is just basically take a bunch of screws and drop them down like I did there, and then pick these screws up and put them into the container and just keep picking parts up and putting them in, and try to do maybe 20 parts without dropping them. So just do 1, 2, 3, and just keep putting these screws in, and then maybe start doing a part, turning it around, then putting it in. Then take a part, turn it around, then put it in. Sorry, I'm looking at my hands right now, so, and I don't have my glasses on, so it'd be much better if I could put my glasses on. I can actually see what I'm doing. So yeah, so you could do 20 where you pick the part up, turn it around in your hand like that, and throw it in. Pick the part up, turn it around in your hand, and throw it in, and just keep doing that until it just feels natural. It's like I took martial arts many years ago, and it's just a matter of repetition. It's like my music and guitar. When you're hitting a note or doing a scale or whatever, after a while the scale just feels natural because you're practicing it over and over again. And just take the part, turn it around, throw it in, and just keep doing that. And maybe try to do 10 in a row first without dropping it, and then do 20 in a row without dropping it, and then do 50 in a row without dropping it. And then the motion will just become natural. You'll learn how to do it without dropping anything. And because I think learning how to actually turn the screw around in your hand without it dropping is like a critical skill for being a watchmaker and working on quality movements. The more expensive the movement I'm working on, the more nervous I get, and so I tend to be very, very careful when I'm doing that. So make sure your tools are in the right condition. So keep your tools nice and clean, nice and sharp, nice and trimmed, nice and whatever finished, and you'll have no problem working with the movement that you're working on. Get a bunch of practice movements so you can strip them down. It'll give you a lot of practice with your screwdrivers and your tweezers, and learning how to manipulate that. So very important to have practice movements, and it's just a lot of practice. So as far as parts flying, if you have a problem with very, very small parts, you can use Rodico on top of the part to hold it in place. while you're unscrewing it, and then you grab it with your screwdriver and be very careful with the pressure, right? You can also put if it's say a capsule you don't want to lose, you can do it inside of a bag. It's not recommended, but you could do it inside of a bag, so like a see-through bag. So if that capsule goes flying, it just hits the walls of the bag. So, and when you do that, you have a big bag. You can take a big bag with an opening, right, and you just work inside that deep, and then do that. So, I actually have never done that before, but I have done some floor scouting quite a few times. I'm trying to do my my Easter egg hunt on the floor for the part that I need that I could never find. That happened to me a while ago on a very small ladies' wristwatch I did for a friend. It was very, very small wristwatch from maybe from the 20s or earlier, and I made a video on it, but the spring, the shock spring on over the one of the capsules flew off, and it was one of those circular shock springs with the little knobbies in 3 positions. And as I turned it, I was actually talking about making sure this thing doesn't fly off and having either a toothpick or some Rodico on the top. And as I was doing that, somehow I pushed it with my screwdriver and the thing flew. And then I made a replacement for it, and it worked really well. And then around 2 weeks later, I found it on my desk, which is kind of funny. So and that was just not being cautious about something and saying, okay, don't do this because it's stupid. So I've done stupid things in watchmaking, but it's just take your time, take a breath of fresh air, and then just don't do it. I think my coffee's getting cold here, so let's see, let's test it. This is Colombian Kool-Aid. It's cold coffee. The new year it's the 2nd right now, and I need to shave. Like I said before, I'm looking like Papa Smurf, so I'm wearing my Citizen Blue Angels watch right now, and it's time to Dayton, Ohio, so the time is absolutely accurate, which I like because I can set pocket watches with it. Anyway, that's my little bit of squirrel distraction moment. That's my video on the use of tweezers. So just practice, and if you get any questions, ask me, but it's just practice, practice, practice. I'm sure surgeons don't jump in and start moving blood vessels around with their tools until they've done it a few times, but we don't need to go to the morgue and pick up an old watch, a dead watch, and work on it. Actually, we do. So those old Russian watch movements, you can buy them on eBay really cheap. You can buy a lot, or you can buy go to Etsy and buy a stack of movements that people use for making costume jewelry and stuff like that, and you can get them for like $50 for 50 watch movements, and they're from Russia, but you can buy them in free shipping, and you've got 50 really good watch movements that you can work on. You can disassemble, you can get them working well if you want, you can practice hairspring work on those watch movements. You can they're basically your victims that you're going to use until you get good enough, and then you want to approach a very small watch. This is a watch that I've completed, with the exception of, let me just show you this here, with the exception of the I'm trying to get this out without touching the face. I'm waiting for a crystal for this watch. It's a little tough to get because it's a really small watch. Let me slide that out sideways like this. Let's see. But when you're working on a watch of this size, just grab that like that. There we go. Okay, so this is a very small ladies pocket watch, probably from the 1850s, maybe earlier, not sure. And if you look at this pocket watch, and you're using tweezers. Look at the size of those tweezers, and look at the size of that pocket watch. So this is like crazy small. So it's if I had my fingernail, I could go in there. But anyway, I'm not going to open that up. So this pocket watch is actually running really well now, and I've got to return it, but I'm waiting for a crystal for it. But if you're working on a watch this size, which I did around 2 months ago, and you're trying to use your tweezers to get screws out of the watch this size, you may be unlucky. That's where you may want to use Rodico instead. So get your piece of Rodico and then form it on the end so it's a nice little tip like that. You can even bend the rodico. You can take the rodico and bend it to give you an angle to pick something up. So you can use rodico to take the screws out. And it's difficult to use rodico to put the screws back in, but it's possible. Often use rodico with hands when you're working on hands and you've got to go sideways, so you're trying to put a hand back in and you're holding the tweezers in your hand like that, and you're just aligning that hand while you've got your pusher in your other hand. So you've got the pushers in this hand and you're lining this up with your tweezers. Then you're actually holding your tweezers like this, and then pushing down like that. So I didn't explain that earlier, but that's another technique here that for hands. I will sometimes use rodico to put the hand in place and then push that down, or I'll use tweezers, put the hand in place and then push that down. And I've got some hand pushers here that are vintage, I think. They're pretty good. I scored these on an eBay, or actually I was on Kijiji and I scored these. So these are really nice, and these are made for pressing hands down, or hand pressers, or whatever you want to call them. But they're so in this case here, I'd be putting the hand in like this, right? And I'd be let me move that over a bit so if I can show you here. So I'd be putting the hand in like this. I'd be holding the hand here, putting it in place, and then pushing down with the hand pusher to actually do it. So now I've got to hold my tweezers this way as opposed to this way. So this is the one time I actually hold the tweezers like that, or maybe the second time I do that, because if I'm removing the balance, let me put this back before it causes issues. Put that back in there, so we've got that nicely contained. But if I'm working on the balance and I want to take the balance cock out, right, for example, I was going to end the video 5 seconds ago, but in this case here, I'll take the screw out and I'll be holding my tweezers lightly in my hand like that, so they're just like this, right? And I'm using my thumb to put pressure on them. So I'm holding like this, I'm putting them, I'm going to have to go underneath here for a second without looking. I'm putting the tweezers below the balance like that, and grabbing the balance cock like this, right? And I've seen other guys grab the balance and the bridge of that, like at the same time for small watches, and pick them both out. But this case here, I'm grabbing it like that, and then I'm actually lifting it up after I've loosened it, and I'm tipping the balance to get it out. But this is the case where I'm holding my tweezers like this, right? So they're just resting in my hand like this. They're not being held like this to pick up screws, right? They're not like this. They're like this because I'm trying to get that balance out properly, right? So see how I can line this up properly? Yeah, so like that. So should I do that right now? Just show you how that's done. I know that my right now things are in the way, right? So let me go to close up here again and get my glasses on. I've made this video maybe a little bit too long by doing this, but what the heck? What the heck? So I just take this like this, and again I get my cameras in the way, so I'm trying to loosen this up a bit. So I go like that, right? And as I said earlier, I'd be grabbing the screw out from the head like this. And again, I need to get closer up because I don't have my loop on right now. I'm doing it kind of loopless. And then in this case here, with this particular movement, right, I want to see if there's a way of loosening that balance from the side. With this movement holder, I just jog it over like that. And then I'm going to get in closer here, just a bit closer to show you how you do this. And of course, hit my hat on the camera. I always do that, don't I? So I'm trying to see whether there's a groove down there, but my lighting's not good, but I don't want to change the lighting. So I'm going to just loosen this up from the edge here. I don't know where the groove is, whether it's on the top or whether it's on the bottom. I think it's down here. Oh, maybe it isn't. There we go. So that's an old Russian movement. That's not it's worth 0. So I've got that loosened up now. So now I'll take that, and again I'll show you how that's removed from the balance. So I'm going to switch to another view here. Just stop recording. Alright, there's another view here. So in this case, as you can see on the top, I'd be grabbing this. I'm showing you the tweezer view here, so I'd be grabbing this like this, and then pulling that out. It is strange that I've got a vibration on my other camera because it's fixed to something that shouldn't be vibrating. So I'd be pulling that out like this, and then tipping the movement, or tipping the whole movement, which would be like this. Get the rodico out of the way here. I'd be grab it like this. Hopefully this works for you, but I'm grabbing it by holding the tweezers like that, as I showed you, on like 3 fingers down, and picking it up like this, and then twisting this movement like that to get it out, like this, and then leave the movement. Don't move the movement. Like, just keep the tweezers and the movement in place, and then move that out of the way, and then you're just going to put that on top of a balance tack. So let me grab one of my very cool balance tacks that I made. So this here balance tack I made, I got some protective clothing on it here, so it's my double tack. So take that off here, take this off here. So I'd take that and then just place that on the balance tack like that, and there we go. So the balance is now on the balance tack, and the screw for that particular thing would go into my neat little bowl. Now I already have a screw in the bowl here, by the way, but it's from another watch, so I got to make sure that that screw doesn't find its way into the wrong watch. So that's what I do. So and to return that balance back, I'm grabbing the balance again like this, right, and moving the balance tack out of the way, moving the watch back in the way, and that prevents me from dropping this or manipulating it, so it's completely in the right place. And then I'll take the movement and I'll put that in like this, right, and I'll lay that down like that, and make sure that's in the right place. And then normally I use my screwdrivers and a toothpick as opposed to my finger, but like I said, I don't care about this old Russian watch that much, so we're not good friends. So there you go. So the balance is now in place again by using that technique. So there you go. That's that. And then I would take this screw, and again with my tweezers I'm holding that screw like this. In this case I could just lay this down and push it in, but what I'll do is I'll grab the screw by the threads like that, and I'll throw it in like this, and then I'll tap it like that. So now that screw's in place, and I can go ahead and screw that down, and just to make sure that the balance, the cock doesn't move around, I'm holding it with a toothpick, like I said before, to give it a little bit of downward pressure, and then I screw that in loosely, make sure the balance is moving, and then away you go. So that's that. Sorry I went off on a rant here and did something else. Hey, thanks for watching my video today. This was all about tweezers. Just make sure you practice, and you'll get very good at using tweezers. Thanks for subscribing to my videos, and if you need to get a hold of me for any work, then you can contact right up there. Where is it? You're going to learn how to point jdwatchservice@gmail.com, jdwatchservice@gmail.com, and I'll respond to you right away, and whatever you want me to do, and we'll just negotiate what that is and figure out what to do. So and if you want any hints or whatever, or want me to make another video on something, I will. Again, this was a video that was by request, so I figured I'd make it and just pass along what I've learned. I'm sure that the watch schools can teach this a lot better, but this is my way of showing you what I do with watches. So thanks again. Have a good rest of your vacation. It's Saturday. I got one day left, and I'm back to work. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later.